Hello and welcome to this session where I'm going to be showing you how to record a macro. So a macro is basically just a set of instructions that you record so that you can repeat them often. There are certain operations that you do more than once and you do not want to be remembering or to be repeating exactly the same thing over and over again. So you'd rather put that set of instructions in a macro so that when you need to perform that process, you simply call the name of the macro. So I'll give a very simple example of a macro where we are going to copy information, paste it, and then format it. So we can go to our survey form just below the survey form, and I've unprotected mine, so you need to go to review and unprotect your sheet so that you are able to work on it again. So I'm going to put here some information: month January, February, March. So it doesn't really matter what you type there. So the macro we want is going to copy this information, is going to paste it here. After pasting, we are going to do some formatting, change fonts, make bold, change color, put some borders, etc. So when you are recording a macro, it's just like recording yourself talking. The moment you press the record button, everything you do from that time is recorded until you press the stop button. So that's what we are going to do. So the first thing, we must go to our view menu. On some of your Excel, you might find there is a developer menu. So if you don't find your macro under the view, look for a developer menu. So I go to macro and I say record macro, and the first thing it will ask me is the name of the macro. So the name of the macro, I'll say duplicate data. Duplicate data is the name of my macro. And if I want a shortcut key, I can say D is my shortcut key, meaning that I can press Control Shift and D on the keyboard to run this macro, right? So every time I press Control Shift and D, it will run the macro. So store the macro in this workbook. So we want to store it in this workbook. You could store it in a different one. The description, I will say this macro copies and formats data. So now it has started recording. So the first thing I'll do is highlight, then I right click and copy, then come here, right click and paste. And then the next thing, on my month, I will right click and change the font size to 14 and the color to red. Then I will highlight everything, right click and go to format cells. So I'm just going a bit fast because for you can do whatever you want with it. There is no rule that says this is what you should do. I'm just recording all the steps that are coming to my mind. So I come to the month, go to home, change the color of the background, then I change the color of the lettering to white, right? And then once I'm done, I will come here and type finished. So that is the end of my macro, and then I want to end by putting my cursor back there. So now I'm done. I can go back to view and go to macro and say stop recording. So I click on stop recording. So now that macro is now part of my worksheet. So for me to be able to see that it works, I actually want to delete this information here. I want to delete it, and then I will right click, go to format, and I want to remove all these borders that are there, and also remove this format. Put no fill. Right, so that when I run the macro, it will redo the operation for me. So what you can put in the macro is anything which you can do in Excel. So all those operations that we're doing, like for example creating a pivot table, if you think it's taking you too much time to go and highlight that data in the employee worksheet where we're highlighting everything, what you can do is you can simply create a macro for creating a pivot chart. So that macro will simply do all the steps of saying insert, you say pivot chart, you click, you go to employee data, you highlight virtually everything that we were doing to create the pivot chart. And then once it is finished and you now have your blank template, before you start selecting the fields, then you stop the macro, so that every time you are creating a new pivot table, you simply call the macro, it does everything for you, collects the data and puts the template there for you, so that all you do is now just start clicking on the fields. So let us see now how this macro is going to work. So I go to view, macro, and I say view macros to see which macros I have. Right, so I've got this macro called duplicate data. So if I click run, it's supposed to do that whole operation that I did of copying, pasting, formatting, and so forth. So let's see if that is going to happen. I click on run. You see, so you could see it going through the whole process and completing. Okay, now let's try a little bit of fun and create a macro that draws a funny person. So I'm going to go to view, macro, and record the macro, and the name of the macro is draw daddy. That's the name of my macro, and the shortcut will be, I'll make it W as my shortcut, and then I'll say this macro draws a daddy. Say okay. Okay, it says there's already a macro assigned to that key, so there's already another one with a W. So let me say E and say okay. Now we've started the process. Now we are going to go to insert and shapes. So let's get a shape, a circle, and then in this circle I'm going to put a smaller circle, and that smaller circle I will format it so that its fill color is white, and I insert another small circle and also format it with a white filling. Then I'm going to draw the neck of this person, of this daddy. Okay, there is his neck, and next I insert his belly. So this guy, he is very fit. Okay, And next I put some arms for this fellow and some legs for this fellow. Right, and I'm almost done. Right, so I can stop my macro for now. So this is how we draw clip art, those images that you see which are not really photos, but you can use within either your word processor or other applications. Alright, so let me delete this daddy and see if my macro is now memorized how to draw a daddy. So I press Control Shift and W if I still remember my shortcut. And E. Control Shift and E. Right. So you can see that it comes up with some kind of error, but it has drawn my daddy. So the macro actually memorized the steps that I recorded, and it repeated that process. So meaning that anything that you want to record, including saving of files, you can go to File to Save. You look in your folder, you look for your files, type in a name. Every process that you can carry on Excel can be recorded in a macro. Alright, so I'd like you to try a few macros, and then I'll see on your worksheets. I'll just go to View and look at the macros and see if there are any macros which have been recorded. Alright, thank you. Let's meet in the next video.